Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So there seems to be a lot of YouTube channels out there certainly doing the kind of hot comic book list videos, and they're pretty fun to kind of stay on top of, just like the ever-changing market in the comic books is kind of fun to stay on top of. But I do always notice those comic books in those videos are usually like, 25-50% more in price, sometimes even like double or tripling in value. So, what I wanted to do here, and I hope this can be an ongoing thing here with the channel, is just get a list of the coldest CGC 9.8 comic books on the comic book market right now that you can expect to buy for fair prices. Because, that's way more my collecting style, is to think of books that I love, books that I'm nostalgic for, that are really awesome, great artists that I love, that aren't really hot right now, because then you can expect to buy those ones for a pretty fair price. And a book, like just a quick example, is Uncanny X-Men 266, the first full appearance of Gambit. Like, before we get into the list, just a quick example. Like, in the last 6 to 8 months, or let's call it 6 to 8 months ago, I was looking at auctions on this one and, thinking of bidding, but just never ended up pulling the trigger. But they ended at like 310, 340, I think one was like 302. I remember one was like right near 300. So that book was a really decent price then, and since that time, it's been on the hot list, I think 3 weeks ago maybe, or something like that, and it's because all these whispers of X-Men coming back to the MCU and maybe Gambit being in it. So that book has really heated up to right around $475, I would say, is like a fair price maybe that you can get that. So, do you want it for, $320 back then, or, $475 now? And certainly my style is to try and get it for the $320 for sure. So, let's get into a full list of 10 of the coldest CGC 9.8 comics on the market right now. Yeah, interesting. Hopefully this will be an ongoing list instead of doing the hot list like most of the YouTube channels. You get these ones at a decent price. First one here is a Star Wars Force Awakens #1. Yeah, the movie adaptation of the kind of a comeback of the Star Wars franchise, sort of the first like MCU Star Wars movie, I guess it would have been too. But this is also the first appearance of Rey and Kylo Ren. So I think they certainly really went with Kylo Ren, and there's a lot of Kylo Ren stuff coming out. So that's certainly a character I think that has a bright future. And you can get this one for really cheap. I do want to shout out on team member, it's a Jerk Yorkie on Instagram, who I've been chatting with for quite a while, just about kind of actively buying. We're both actively buying CGC 9.8s. He had grabbed this one for $53. Yeah, and he grabbed sort of the first print normal cover. We'll get into a couple other covers, but for that one, there's 24 CGC 9.8s graded on the planet. One of 24 collector item is pretty cool. Again, this is probably like a very cold book, like 77.4% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8, so not a very, super rare ratio, but, more about the one of 24 collector item in this one. This is the first print with the kind of Rey on the cover prominently. The other ones I kind of recommend. There's the Neil Adams sort of Kylo Ren cover. Neil Adams, classic artist. This is one I actually would kind of want. Certainly would be very tempted if it kind of popped up in an auction from my favorite seller, or, I saw a really good buy now in Canada or something like that. The Neil Adams variant. Also, like the movie poster version of the book, I think is another cool one to go after probably, because that would probably be like an easy one to sell, and there's not very many of those in the 9.8, but certainly this book works in the raw too, and I'm sure you can find this extremely cheap in the raw, it being such a cold book. Yeah, so Star Wars Force Awakens, Jerk Yorkie got it for $53 in a cold auction, he kind of said, and, I think that's lower end of fair market value, so maybe even if you really wanted this one, pay up to like $70 for it. Like, I think $69.99 might be kind of fair for this one, because, yeah, first Rey, first Kylo Ren, I think two characters that are cold, but with some future potential for sure, with the whole Star Wars franchise. Next one I want to get into, cold books. Alias #1, yeah, first appearance of Jessica Jones. This is a book, certainly, that I think when I was first getting back into the hobby, it was pretty hot. The Jessica Jones series was really popular on Netflix there. But a cool book, I think, and there's 751 CGC 9.8s in the blue label, so, more of a popular sort of Marvel book. Although it's like a Max title book, I think it was, but it's kind of a spin-off of Marvel, I believe. 45.2% is the CGC 9.8 ratio, so not a too bad CGC 9.8 ratio either, which for a modern book. And yeah, I think this one's a really good price right now. I was looking on auctions on eBay, completed listings, it being a pretty cool book. Lowest price is about $155. I saw one at $155, and we'll call it, they're in the last 2 months here, this whole range. And up to the higher range, $195. And certainly during Jessica Jones on Netflix, you know, you'd see these go, because I think back then there wasn't as many graded, and it caught a lot of people off guard. Yeah, $250 was sort of the norm. Maybe you got a really good deal around $200, like $199 would have been a screaming deal, which is now the higher end of fair market value. Hopefully you get this one closer to $150. But yeah, I just think, you know, Jessica Jones has got some potential. I don't know too much about the story or anything, and I never watched the show, to be honest, either, but this is one that's cooling off now compared to where it was in the past, and worth considering if you're a fan of Jessica Jones. That's kind of the one to get, yeah. Alias #1, the first appearance of Jessica Jones. Next one's a really cool book, and mentioned this on a kind of cold videos before, and I wanted to sort of not mention some of the ones I've mentioned on cold, some of the ice cold videos we've done in the past, but this one has been on those before. But X Factor #6, first full appearance of Apocalypse. Yeah, looking on the census for X Factor #6, 940 CGC 9.8s out there, so a big popular X-Men villain, like one of the coolest X-Men villains of all time, so there's a lot of the 9.8s, but 19.8% is the CGC 9.8 ratio, so of all graded copies, only 20%, we'll call it, are 9.8s, which is a nice investment grade ratio. It's not super low or anything, but it's really nice for kind of this age of a book, sort of mid-80s, mid to later 80s. But yeah, First Full Apocalypse is such a big villain, and I had someone on the team message me. I think they grabbed it for like $235 or something like that in the CGC 9.8, and that is sort of what I remember kind of this book going for like 6 months ago. And there's not a lot of 9.8s you can say that about, I think. Like almost everyone seems to have, you know, increased in value here with the whole COVID market situation that happened and the hot CGC 9.8 market. But X Factor #6, First Full Apocalypse, is one you can still get. You know, I think that's lower end of fair value, 230 something that someone got on the team there. Maybe consider getting up to 275. The newsstands kind of maybe even over 300. They're pretty rare during this time. But when you think about like Null is so hot right now. Some of these modern books, like you can get First Full Apocalypse, such a classic X-Men villain, for you know, 250, let's call it. That's looking really good with a lot of these modern variants. And I know they're low printed and they're cool, like I'm not saying they're not, but going for like 800, 700, and even Teen Titans 12, a book that I love is a modern book, going for like 750 kind of deal right now. And that's quite expensive for a modern book, I think. So X Factor #6, First Full Apocalypse, cool villain too, for 250 is looking so good right now on a cold list. Next one, Batman 609. Yeah, this is the first appearance of Hush, Tommy Elliot. And you kind of get him sort of as he's a person in this one. He doesn't really get into his Hush gig or really show himself as Hush. But Batman 609 is part of the Jim Lee awesome Batman Hush run. And you get a first appearance of a good villain. You can get this one at a good price right now, too. There's 440 CGC 9.8s on the census. And 68.5% is the CGC 9.8 ratio. So, yeah, it's pretty popular. 440 9.8s. Like, that's quite a lot graded, not too rare, but you know, it's a decent collector item, I think, for the price. And for the price on this one, if you're patient in an auction, it's pretty much under 100 for this one. But you know, $99.99 I think is a fair price for this. Like if you paid that, I could totally see it. But maybe in an auction you get it closer to like $75 possibly. You know, not one that's too searched. I think it does fit on a cold list, but you get a first appearance, and Jim Lee are, you know, almost can't lose at that price for this one. Certainly if you're a villains guy. This one has tempted me in the past, but I don't have that one. Okay, next one here is kind of a cool one, actually. It's Batman Arkham Knight #1. So, yeah, I mean, made me kind of think of this one is, I think, you know, it is one that in the CGC 9.8, it's not really searched very much. And even in the raws, like, I think this is one you could expect to in the raws get for maybe like $5 or $10 probably in between there as a range. But I think if they ever wanted to do a different type of Batman movie, I think I'm on the record, like, of course, a Batman Beyond, but I think another good idea would be, like, Batman Arkham Knight. Like, I think if they just made a movie like that, really cool with big actors and stuff, that would be a huge hit. So I think this one's just got potential. So Batman Arkham Knight #1 in the CGC 9.8. There's 60 of them out there in the 9.8. So quite a few of these graded for like almost an unknown a first appearance. Because this is the first appearance of Arkham Knight, and his first appearance in DC continuity is Detective Comics 1000, which has 1 million covers, and there's some cool covers in there, but I personally don't have any of them. And I think there's just probably a better way to go if you want some sort of Arkham Knight exposure, I would say. 81.1% the 9.8 ratio, so not really rare in this one, which is why, in the 9.8, like, you could probably get this one from like 50 to like $80, $90 maybe. I'm sure there's buy nows out there for like $100 and maybe a little bit more. Occasionally these will pop up, but I think if you're patient, you get it. This is one to easily get under 100 in the CGC 9.8 because it is just so cold. But again, I think Batman Arkham Knight would just be a hit as a movie, and cool cover, cool art. Like, this is one I was kind of reading online. The interiors are pretty cool too. So Batman Arkham Knight, a pretty cheap one to consider on a cold list, I think. Next one here is Avengers 684. So the first time Hulk gets his immortal powers. So first Immortal Hulk, basically. Pretty cool cover on this one, kind of a close-up of his immortal eyes. A lot of these on the census. 1,523 9.8s out there. Really popular one, but you could still get it for a good price. 83.1% the 9.8 ratio, so not really particularly rare either. But you kind of see these sell sort of like from 100 to 130, I guess. Like sometimes you'll see a 129.99. Occasionally these kind of get up to that range. There's quite a lot out there, and it's not really rare in the 9.8, so it is one I think you can look to get closer to 100 in the 9.8, but it's a pretty hot market, and this is a cool one to kind of go after. And again, not really ridiculously expensive, so I think it fits on a cold list. Avengers 684, a good modern Hulk book to consider. And the next one here is An Amazing Spider-Man 298. So this one, I'm going to say it maybe has heated up a little bit, but still, you see auctions around this time sort of end up in like the 325 range. And, before I was sort of used to this one maybe going for like, 280, 270, maybe 6 to 12 months ago, closer to 250 even, but it hasn't went up that much. But Amazing Spider-Man 298, you get the first Todd McFarlane Spider-Man art ever in this one, which I think is the big seller of it. And a tough white cover in the CGC 9.8 to get it. A tough one to get in near mint plus. There are, 693 CGC 9.8s out there. So not too many for, it's a really good one for if you're kind of a McFarlane cult fan like I am and really like Spider-Man. But 13% of is the 9.8 ratio, which is really nice, actually. Of all graded copies, 13% of them are CGC 9.8s. For this sort of late 80s type of book is really rare. And this kind of, for Amazing Spider-Man 298, Amazing Spider-Man 300, Amazing Spider-Man 301, they have really nice 9.8 ratios for a late 80s book. So that's why they're quite expensive. But this one is sort of the under-the-radar pick of those, I think, because 300 and 301 have even lower 9.8 ratios. They're even more rare, and they're really expensive. But this one's still pretty cold, I think. It hasn't really increased like some of the other ones. First, Eddie Brock in this one. Cameo of Eddie Brock in this one. So I did sort of mention those prices there, where I think, maybe if you're lucky, you get it under, maybe in an old case or something, under 300, but this one still hasn't heated up too much and worth it. Probably paying up to $350 for a really nice one, in my opinion. Mine's got really nice colors. If you sort of notice with this issue, really nice red here, which I haven't seen on many 9.8s or any version of this book. Mine is kind of fresh off the printing press, first one probably. Got lucky that way. I didn't even know when I originally bought it. This was one I bought almost 3 years ago, I would say. But Amazing Spider-Man 298, I think, fits good on a cold list. So next one, we'll stick with the McFarlane theme. Is Spawn #1 in the newsstand. And I made an Instagram post of kind of my Spawn #1 newsstand, and I got a raw one in the newsstand as well. And it is just a really good book now that I don't think is really, it certainly hasn't heated up like Miles Morales or Null or Ahsoka Tano or anything like that. Or Teen Titans 12, Batman Who Laughs. So, this is one that's coming into focus more with those really expensive prices than a lot of these other. Because, so much nostalgia. So many people know this book and want it. And, collectors are always going to be coming back into the hobby that were into it in the 90s. And there were so many people into it back then. So Spawn number 1 in the newsstand, which is the sort of 1 of 100 variant, I guess you could say, is, I think, the one I recommend. Because we'll look on the census quick. It's there's 5,716 9.8s out there. And Spawn number 1 just goes to show you how popular Spawn, was in the 90s. There were, I think it was like 1.7 million Spawn number 1s printed or something like this. Or something like that. So that'll put that, or if you believe that 1 of 100, that puts this around there about 15,000 to 17,000 copies of Spawn number 1 newsstand ever printed. Getting a little details there. But for the price, you get the more rarer version of this super nostalgic book is, I think, just a great buy. And it's easy to kind of sell on the way out if you get a good price. So, yeah, and prices for this one, so, I bought mine. It was, maybe about a year ago now, and it was $375. Plus a little bit of shipping to Canada, and now you tend to see them go for you don't see them under $450 too much lately. Yeah, most of the completed listings I was seeing were $469.99 looking in that area. So I think if you're lucky and you wait for an auction, maybe you get it closer to $400. But I still think it's kind of worth that price, given some modern variants going for $800 and Star Wars books over $1,000. It just, first Spawn in the more rare version for a decent price, I think, kind of fits on a cold list for sure. Alright, next one here is a book I don't have, but one certainly worth mentioning. It's Avenging Spider-Man number 9. This is the first time Carol Danvers becomes Captain Marvel. And this book was pretty hot, certainly when it got hot there with the Captain Marvel MCU movie in the CGC 9.8. I actually really like this cover. It's a decent looking book. It certainly is kind of tempting me. Because I think it's kind of on the cold list. Yeah, it certainly was hot when MCU Captain Marvel came out in theater, but one to consider now. 863 CGC 9.8s on the census there. So 1 of 863. It got really popular there, so yeah. 47.5% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8s. Yeah, any modern book that's below 50% is, that's looking good. That means it's a decently rare book in the 9.8, because most of them, as with this list, are 83, 81%, 68. That's a little bit less rare in the 9.8 when you get over 50% for the CGC 9.8 ratio. Yeah, Avenging Spider-Man number 9, one to consider. Looking at the completed listings on eBay, the range was $210 to $275 right now. And yeah, I think this is one, if you want it, if you like Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, the whole thing, you get this closer to $200. I think that's actually a pretty great book to have in the CGC 9.8 at that sort of 47.5, 9.8 ratio. Pretty rare. Yeah, decently rare, under 50. And yeah, I think certainly during that Captain Marvel movie, this one, I think a lot sold for $399.99. Yeah, that was if you sort of saw the movie and you didn't know too much, that was a decently fair price back then. And maybe if you were really patient, it was closer to $300. But this was a hot book back then, and one that certainly cooled off, and worth it to mention on the list here. And last one, number 10 coldest books of hopefully an ongoing list here that you can buy at a fair price. But I think Transformers number 1, decent time to buy this one. And yeah, I got one in the CBCS 9.8. Yeah, I'll throw up a graphic of a CGC 9.8. Leave that there so you can check that out too. But for Transformers number 1, yeah, not too much hype that I don't know about any sort of imminent Transformers movies or anything like that. So there's a 451 CGC 9.8 of Transformers number 1 out there. And this is one I've mentioned before, just a super solid investment grade 1980s book. There's a lot of Transformers collectors that collect the toys, and the toys are so expensive in the box. And, when you start, I remember mentioning when I bought this, when you start looking at the prices of those toys in the box and stuff, Transformers 1 and the CGC 9.8 was looking like nothing. And I bought my CBCS 9.8 for like $4.30 it was in an auction. So I thought that was worth it, considering some of these prices for the Transformers collectibles get really high. So it's just a good collectible, and you get the first, Autobots, Decepticons, Megatron, Optimus Prime, like they're all in there. Not all of them, but most of them, certainly the originals. 451 9.8, 17.4%, the CGC 9.8 ratio. So all graded copies, 17.4% of them are CGC 9.8. It's pretty good for, mid-80s book, and it's certainly, you get all the big classic first appearance in comic books of Transformers. And yeah, this is one too. Like I said, just not too many whispers right now, I don't think. And looking on the completed listings for prices, I saw one in an old case sell for $549.95. So that I think is kind of the low end of fair market value. Like a first print Transformers 1 CGC 9.8 in an old case though for $550. Great buy, I think. And then auctions, there was one at $611 for an auction in a new case looking good. One $740 in a new case looking good. So I think that's kind of the range there. There were some completed listings too that were best offers, and they weren't kind of transparent about the price, so I wasn't able to kind of get those. But I would imagine that's sort of the range, and if you really want this one, it's probably $700 to $800. Yeah, I think most of those best offers are probably right around $700 would be my guess. But Transformers number 1, yep, I think it fits on a cold book, even though it's expensive. And there's just I think a big sort of future potential upside to first appearance of Transformers, and that's why I bought one. And I'm on the record as saying I really want a CGC 9.8, but fits really good into a cold list, I think. So, all right, we'll do top picks really quick. All right, 3 top picks. So first top pick, Spawn number 1, Newsstand. Yeah, just, big first appearance of a hero that has a huge following, and you can get the sort of rare variant, even though, it was so printed that this one's almost not that rare, but still pretty rare, about kind of the average or the estimate, as I mentioned there, kind of 15,000 to 17,000 print on this one. That's not too bad, actually, for like any book. That's a low print. So Spawn number 1 Newsstand. I just think, I want one more. I'm on the record as saying that. And, first appearance of a big hero, big following. So nostalgic to so many people. You can see a lot of people coming into the hobby and wanting it. So, worth the sort of $450 price if you can get it for that, I think, right now. Avenging Spider-Man number 9, kind of a dark horse pick a bit, because I've said before, like, Captain Marvel is not really my thing. I hadn't even really saw the movie or anything like that. But I do like this cover, and I do just think, this one was going for $400. I definitely, saw it going for $400 many times. Completed listings, I remember. So I just think it's a good timing. Like, if you're into this book, it deserves to kind of be a top pick, even though I probably not purchase it myself. And the last one here, and I almost couldn't choose, so it's the last 2. Transformers number 1 and Amazing Spider-Man 2.98. Yeah, just 2 classic 80s books that they're great investment grade books for the price right now. Because, they got pretty low 9.8 ratios. They got really cool, first appearances and big moments in comics and stuff like that. Yeah, so, and certainly there's a lot of modern 9.8s right now that are really expensive. And, when you sort of look at the credentials of these ones, Transformers being a little bit more expensive, a real serious investment grade book, $600 to $700 for that one in the 9.8 white pages, but still, I think good values on both of them. So I couldn't even choose one for the third pick. Transformers number 1 and Amazing Spider-Man 2.98 tied. So, okay, we'll conclude up here, and I hope that this does become a sort of ongoing thing. Maybe 3 times a month, maybe we'll do a sort of ongoing coldest CGC 9.8 comics on the market that you can get at fair prices, rather than just doing another hot video where all those books, again, I always notice that really they're just way more expensive than what I'm used to, because I just always follow the comic book market because I'm enjoying it. Mostly 9.8 market, but when you see all those books on the hot list and then I look at the prices and I'm like, oh man, that was way cheaper 2 months ago. And I probably should have bought it. But I just think it's worth it to kind of do the sort of opposite of that, and you'll get a better price that way. Yeah, and another thing too I mentioned in the past is being independent is really important. I think when you're collecting comic books, making your own decisions, soul searching, and finding what you actually really like what covers really made you just wow, I want it. That's what you want to go after. And a lot of times if you do that, a lot of those books are on the cold list. Like, you're not doing it because like Disney's having all this promotion, or DC just had this big announcement about this other thing, or this show's doing good on Netflix and now you got to buy that. Like, it's not. Yeah, I wouldn't go that route collecting. Like, do a little more soul searching, be independent, and then buy those books do your pricing research and buy those books. Be patient, get those at the fair value, and you almost can't lose at that point. And certainly I've overpaid, so we're not going to get them all at the fair, awesome value. But the more you do that, the better you feel, and you kind of avoid like buyer's remorse and getting turned off to the hobby if you just follow the hot list and buy all the hot books. That's that can. That's kind of a recipe for overpaying, putting it lightly, maybe. So, alright, if you haven't already, I would invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8 and hit the bell for all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter as well. I'll have all the links in the description below. I'll have a full list of the 10 coldest comics on the market right now, unofficial coldest comics on the market in the list below as well. But thanks so much for watching today. Really appreciate, all the support out there and all the messaging on Instagram. Great conversations I'm having on Instagram. Yeah, just really fun to kind of talk to everyone who's actively buying 9.8s and stuff. So, yeah, send me a message on Instagram if you did have any questions. But thank you very much for watching today. I'll see you on the next one.